Alright, what's good everybody? It's your boy Akeem and welcome to today's vlog. Here to give you my grades for the AFC West division for the picks of the 2013 NFL draft. I'm going to start things off with the Denver Broncos. I think they had a solid draft overall. Now they have over 1,000 pounds at the defensive tackle position from their first round selection in Sylvester Williams out of UNC. I think this was a solid selection. He's going to be working with in the rotation with Kevin Vickerson and Terrence Knighton. I think all three of these players can work well at the defensive tackle position. With all three of these players combined, they're over 1,000 pounds overall. With their second pick, they picked up a good workhorse running back in Monty Ball out of Wisconsin. The one thing that concerns me is his wear and tear issue. He has had over 1,000 carries throughout his career as a Badger, including just nearly 400 carries this past season. I don't know how much is left in the tank. He's been beaten up pretty much throughout his career in college football, particularly for the past 2 seasons. But I think that he could become the starter right away for this team. He's going to really be battling things out with Pro Bowler Willis McGahee. McGahee's still a good running back, but he's coming back from a torn ligament, and he's actually over 30 years old, and that's a little bit concern for him. So I think that Monty Ball can get that starting nod. With their in the 5th round, they picked up a couple of decent players, and I think that has the potential to become reliable players for this team. At the 5th round, they picked up Quantarius Smith, the defensive end out of Western Kentucky. Now, there was a big void that they needed to fill in Elvis Dumerville. He's no longer with the team, so they needed a player to replace him to work well opposite of All-Pro Von Miller, especially in getting those sacks. And I think with the season that Smith had this past season for Western Kentucky, had over double-digit sacks, I think he has the potential to become a good starter for this team. And in the same round, they picked up Tavares King, the receiver out of Georgia. I think he could become a decent, reliable number 3 receiver behind Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas, 2 great 1,000-yard receivers. And I think this could be a decent tandem in the National Football League and help out Peyton Manning to give him another option picking up Tavares King. So overall for these selections, I'm going to give them a solid B. I think they had a good draft. Next team we need to talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs. They had to deal with a lot of off-season work. They picked up quarterback Alex Smith from the San Francisco 49ers, so he is now that guy at quarterback, and they needed to pick up a good player to protect him, especially in that blind side. Now, there was a big, heavy debate between Eric Fisher and Luke Joeckel out of Texas A&M, Eric Fisher out of Central Michigan. This was kind of like a Rick Meyer, Drew Bledsoe in the 90s, as well as Ryan Leaf, Peyton Manning kind of debate to see who will be number 1 and number 2 at the same position. One player might be a bust while the other can shine in the National Football League. Now, I hope the best for both these players. I think both these players can become good Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackles. But with their first pick, they went with Eric Decker. He has bigger size than Luke Joeckel, and I think that he could work well and protect Alex Smith. I still think this was a good pick overall, but but at the same time, I would rather have went with the better talent, the more experienced talent-wise, and Luke Joeckel, because Joeckel had to deal with tougher competition in the SEC, in which I explained before between the SEC and the MAC conference, in which Eric Fisher did play for. But I think Eric Fisher is still a good, solid pick. In the 2nd round, they picked up a decent tight end out of Cincinnati and Travis Kelce. I was a little bit surprised with this selection because they did pick up Anthony Fasano out of Miami Dolphins, and they still have Tony Muaki, who had over 400 yards receiving. I think that Kelce can contribute for this team, but I think they could have picked up a good player, particularly in the defensive line, and help upgrade that defensive line overall defensively. In the 3rd round, this was another question mark pick. They picked up a good running back out of Arkansas and Niles Davis, but he had to deal with a knee injury 2 seasons ago, and that's why he didn't do too well this past season. Still somewhat recovering, trying to get back to that form, and I think he's going to be that big back that Coach Andy Reid's going to use, particularly in 3rd down situations. He weighs 227 pounds. At the 4th round, they picked up a good leader at linebacker and Nico Johnson. Now, this whole linebacking core for Andy Reid's defense, it's full of studs. They have Tamba Ali, Justin Houston, Derek Johnson, and now they picked up Nico Johnson. I think they can have a great linebacking core overall for the Chiefs. Now, they didn't really address the D-line until the last pick in Mike Catapano out of the defensive end out of Princeton. He had great numbers, but it is the Ivy League, so I'm not really feeling this pick overall. I think they could have did better and picked a good defensive end in the second round, in which I believe they should have did. And because of that, I'm going to have to give the Kansas City Chiefs a C+ for their efforts in this year's draft. Next team they need to talk about is the Oakland Raiders. I think they had an outstanding draft. Surprisingly enough, this whole new Raider organization regenerated. They picked up great players. They look like they're trying to start to get things done at Oakland. With their first pick, they went with DJ Hayden out of Houston. I think this was a great selection because they were actually looking forward and probably even picking them at number 3. But they traded down, which was a smart idea, to get more selections, and they still got the player in which they wanted at number 12 in Hayden. I think he's a talented athlete. Yes, he had to deal with that shoulder injury, but he is back, and he had a great senior season this past year. Their second pick in the second round, they picked up a good offensive tackle out of Florida State, and Melanick Watson. I think he has good size. He could probably start right away. In the third round, this is when I really started to believe in this Raider organization and how they're trying to rebuild. They picked up C.O. Moore, the linebacker out of Connecticut. I think this was an excellent selection, and I think that this could boost up that linebacking stock overall for the Oakland Raiders. In the fourth round, they picked up a quarterback out of Arkansas, a good quarterback, one of my top 5 quarterbacks coming into this year's draft, and Tyler Wilson. Now, Matt Flynn is most likely to be the starter, but this could be a little bit of a quarterback battle between Wilson and Flynn, just like how Matt Flynn had to deal with that battle to Russell Wilson, and Seattle lost that battle, so he has to beware and be prepared this season against Tyler Wilson. But I think Matt Flynn, because of more years in the National Football League and starting a new rookie, I'm not really too sure that Wilson will get that starting nod at quarterback over Matt Flynn. Next player we need to talk about in the 6th rounds and the later rounds, he's picked up a couple of good players. Nick Casa out of the tight end out of Colorado. I think this was a pretty good pick to help out with him and Brandon Myers working together. Also in the 6th round, they picked up a running back out of UCF, Latavius Murray. He had over 5 yards per carry. Now, one position in particular that they should have went with is a receiver in the earlier rounds. They did not pick up the receiver until the 7th round, and Bryce Butler out of San Diego State. I think he's a decent receiver, but they did not pick up a receiver in which Matt Flynn or Tyler Wilson, whoever is at quarterback, they need more receivers and more weapons offensively. They did not do the job well on that department, but still they had a great draft, and because of that receiver selection, I'm going to have to give this team an A-. I think they did a great job overall. And last but not least, need to talk about the San Diego Chargers. I think they had a pretty good draft overall, starting with their first round selection and DJ Fluker out of Alabama. Now, me, honestly, I still think this was a good pick, but they should have tried to trade up to pick up a better offensive tackle like Lou Joko or maybe even Lane Johnson, but I still think that DJ Fluker is an outstanding blocker. With the second selection, a little bit of a controversy here. They picked up Manti Te'o out of Notre Dame. I think this is a great pick overall, but the reason why I said it's a little bit of controversy is because he's going to be playing up against DJ Fluker, who is whooping his butt in the national championship. Now, I think these two players are going to have to work well as teammates, but I think this is going to be a good competition, great practice between the two, a good stellar linebacker against a great offensive tackle, and DJ Fluker, I think that Manti Te'o will recover. Now, also a good thing about the San Diego Chargers is that they still have Eric Weddle at the safety position, who is a devoted Mormon, so I think he will put Manti Te'o under his wing at San Diego. In the third round, they picked up a good first-round talented wide receiver in Keenan Allen. I think this was a great pick. Hopefully, he does not have the ego like I believe he does. He's still a talented receiver, and I think he does have that first-round quality talent, and they picked him up in the third round. I think this was a good steal for them. Now, in the later rounds, they didn't really have like great picks, but I think they picked up some good, reliable players like Steve Williams, the defensive back out of Cal, in the 5th round. In the 6th round, they picked up defensive end out of Florida International, and Tarek Williams. He had 14.5 tackles for loss this past season. And in their final pick, they picked up a quarterback from Utah State with a good arm in Brad Sorensen, and he will duke out the backup position battle between him and Charlie Whitehurst to back up Phillip Rivers, and I still think Phillip Rivers has a lot left in that tank to be that leader at quarterback. He's still a great quarterback overall. So for their selections, I'm going to have to give the San Diego Chargers a B, a solid B. I think they had a good draft, particularly with the first 3 picks. Now, next time I'm going to catch you guys is tomorrow, where I will talk about the AFC North Division and give you their grades for their selections for this year's NFL Draft. Thank you for watching today's vlog. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Beatings.